Thank you everybody for attending. We really appreciate taking the time out of your day to learn about TTB Tamer. My name is Daniel. I'm the founder of TTB Tamer. I also handle all of the customer service emails and all the phone calls. And chances are, if you email anybody at TTB Tamer besides Keith, you're going to be talking to me. Keith handles most of our email marketing and outreach. And then we also have Nate, who's our developer. Nate's not on the call at the moment. Keith is in the chat, and you can also see all the questions. Um, First, a quick breakdown of what we'll be covering tonight. Should only take about 45 minutes. I'll give a quick backstory about the creation of TTB Tamer. Then we'll dive into how breweries use TTB Tamer to help them with their reporting. And I'll give a quick demo of the software. At the end of the demo, we'll have a link to some Brew Log templates that we put together for some of our current clients. They might be helpful for you as well. They're free to use as brew logs in your brewery, or you can just download them to compare them to what you're currently using. If you scroll down in your webinar screen, there's an area where you can post questions. Feel free to ask questions, and we'll do a quick Q&A at the end of the webinar. And then also, just to let you know, this webinar is being recorded, and you'll be sent a link for the replay. In case I cover something a little too quickly for you, you can rewatch it. And we'll also give out an email where you can send questions if something comes up in the future. So just a quick disclaimer before I jump into our backstory. I just want to make clear that we're not tax lawyers or accountants or TTB agents. So we can't offer accounting, legal, or official TTB answers. We have been helping brewers with their TTB reporting for about 5 years, so we can help with quite a bit. But for legal questions, or if you need official TTB answers to something, we would need to refer you to your lawyer or accountant or directly to the TTB. So let me jump into our backstory. To make a long story short, I spoke directly on the phone with 20 different brewers located in Colorado, California, Michigan, and Florida. And I asked them, what's the biggest pain of the brewing process that doesn't actually involve brewing? There were quite a few common themes like managing inventory, planning production schedules, managing kegs, and stuff like that. The problem that stood out to me as the most painful was finding time and keeping track of paperwork. Specifically, everyone was having a hard time understanding their operations reports, and they were spending a lot of time trying to give themselves a general education about the paperwork so that it made sense and they could be confident that what they were doing was actually correct. As we chatted more and more and dove deeper into the problem, there were three basic needs that brewers were trying to solve. They wanted to understand the paperwork requirements themselves, but the TTB just doesn't allow this to be very easy. There are no simple tutorials or real world examples for anyone to reference. The new simplified forms kind of help with that problem just by shrinking the size of the form overall, but it doesn't completely solve this problem. Related to number one, brewers wanted to know that even though they're filling out the forms and the math works, they wanted to know that what they're actually reporting was based in reality. The last thing anybody ever wanted was to, find out 2 or 3 years later that what they've been doing was actually incorrect, and then have to go through an audit that might result in fines or a refiling of more paperwork at the very least, to refile correct paperwork. And then the last thing that brewers needed was something that was quick and easy. The process for filling out their reports shouldn't take forever. And they were typically spending 2 to 3 days compiling their brew logs for a reporting period, running a calculator or putting together a spreadsheet for the whole process. And it just isn't something that a typical brewer can easily make time for. On top of just taking a long time, it's normal for a brewer, just like everybody else in the world, to procrastinate up to 1 or 2 days before the due date. And then this would just create a lot more stress on the whole situation. So when I talked to brewers about their current reporting process to find out exactly what they were doing, most of them told me that they would take daily brew logs manually, either by writing everything down on a clipboard or typing things into a spreadsheet. And then at the end of the reporting period, they would sit down to compile all of these logs or notes and then fit them on the forms the best way they knew how with the time that they had available. In some cases, it was a task of just trying to make the forms work rather than being able to fill out the forms correctly simply because that they didn't know what the forms were asking for, uh, exactly in the first place. So none of this sounded fun, and I thought that we could help with the whole process, and that's how TTB Tamer was born, with a lot of direct feedback from brewers. You would put together some software, send it over, let them use it. They would tell us what was wrong, what would do to improve it, and it would go on and on like that. Just before I get any further, I wanted to mention again that we've put together some Brew Log templates that we can make available, or we will make available at the end of this webinar. I'll give you that link. I don't want to distract everybody right now with that link, so I'll do that at the end. But if you don't have a good Brew Log template for your brewery right now, or you just want to compare what you're doing to what we put together for our users, I encourage you to download those and check them out. Even if you get nothing else from this webinar, we'd be really happy, and it would make our day if the forums helped some of you. So definitely check those out. So all boiled down, here is the reporting process in TTB Tamer. After you create your account, you would log into TTB Tamer and make entries when an event happens. We recommend that this happens daily at the end of the day. The official TTB stance on record keeping is to keep your records up to date within one business day. So for example, if you had a brew day today, you would have by the end of the day tomorrow to update your records to show what you did in the brewery. Then after you've made your entries, you would, in TTB Tamer, take a quick look at the inventories and the numbers inside of TTB Tamer to make sure that they are making sense. We make it really easy to do this and make it super easy to make adjustments on the fly. And I'll show you a little bit of that in a little bit. And then at the end of the period, you basically just print your reports. Again, give them a quick glance to make sure things are looking correct. And then you file them with the TTB. That's either, mailing those out, printing out hard copies and mailing them out, or if you have a pay.gov account, you can electronically file on pay.gov. So with that, let's take a quick look of the inside the software. So again, after you've done the whole setup process and told TTB Tamer, about your brewery and things like that, the next time you log in, you'll be taken to the dashboard. The dashboard has a few different overviews, such as all of your inventory being calculated based on the entries you've made so far. You can drill down into these and see how all of the different entry categories are being computed to come up with your ending inventory. There's a calendar that shows the current dates and upcoming due dates. There's also an area where it shows what the current period is, due dates, end dates, and then the due dates for the various reports. And then at the bottom, there's some tutorial videos that give you a quick overview of what's going on in TTB Tamer if you're new to the software or you just want a refresher. At the top, there's basically you can click to see what we've been working on. We update the software pretty much every week with some updates. We're constantly doing things to improve everything. On every page, you'll find some specific hints that are directed towards the page. So if you're brand new and just want an overview of what's going on the page, you can click through the hints. You can manage your settings in the brewery, manage your password and your subscription here. And then to navigate most of the software that you'll be using daily, You click on the little shield in the upper left, and you can get to the pages that we use for most of our entries and batches and reports and stuff like that. The page that you'll be using to make entries is called the Make Entries page. Pretty self-explanatory. We currently have two versions of this page available, the original Make Entries page, and then the new page that we've been working on to simplify things. The old version will eventually be phased out. The new version is based around what we call processes. And a process is just basically a saved group of entries. And we'll go through an example about that in a minute. So for example, you might create a brew day process that would have entries like amount of beer fermenting, materials used, stuff like that, that you would use at the end of a brew day. And then you might create another process called forced carbonation or racking day that you would use when a beer is done fermenting and then is actually racked to a bright tank for, or for filtering or forced carbonation. And then it would have entries like beer transferred to racking bulk and entries for loss due to trube and things like that. And then similarly, you would create another process for kegging and bottling, depending on if you do either of those. And then perhaps another process specifically for sales. So instead of having all of these entries, over 140 of them, on one page that you would have to look through every time that you use TTB Tamer, you would create these separate processes. And then whenever you did one of those processes in your brewery, you would pull it up and then you would only see what you want to see instead of hunting through, like I said, over 140 other options. And then once these various processes are created and saved, they can be recalled really quickly up here just using the search bar. Another way to use these processes that we've been seeing people do that, they would create a process specific for the person who is making the entries. So for example, your brewers would have a specific process for them that only shows the entries that they'll ever need to make. And then you would create another process specific for, maybe your sales manager that would only show the sales entries so that nobody would ever get confused, which entries do I need to make and which is being handled by somebody else and things like that. They would just need to pull up, the specific process and then they wouldn't have to worry about anything else. I want to create a quick sales process to give you an idea about what it's all about. I'm not going to take a lot of time to give a tutorial on all of the tools that are available to create a process. There's a lot of cool features and it'll take about an hour just to go through all of that by itself. So I'll skip over a bunch of details for this demo. So what I did earlier today was I favorited all of the sales entries that I want to use for this demo just by giving them a star. That makes them a favorite, and then I can quickly access them by flipping this switch. So you can see here that for the sales process that I'm going to create, I'm going to have 4 different entries. Beer sold in the tavern from kegs, beer removed for sale, distributed to another restaurant or bar or distributor in kegs, beer removed for sale in cases. And then, hypothetically, occasionally I walk into the cooler and I find broken bottles in a case. And so I want to be able to make a quick entry for that specific problem so that I can do that easily. So to make this process, I just add them. And I can add multiple processes or multiple entries to a process if I want to. So let's just add 2 of those, one of these questions and one of these and one of these. When I've got all my entries added to my process, I just click the save icon here. And then I'm in edit mode is what we call this for our process. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to give this a quick name. so that I can find it quickly again later. I have an option here to keep this process private to myself, or I could make it public to everybody who's connected to my brewery. So if you have multiple people, you can go in as the admin of this account, create processes for everybody, or you can create your own specific process that is a little more complicated, specifically for yourself, that nobody else will be able to see if you don't want to confuse everybody else. I have options here to use a specific unit for every entry. So the kegs that my hypothetical brewery uses are sixtels. So I'll just select those in the drop down here for my keg entries. If you're curious, we also have 50-liter kegs, corny kegs, 5 gallons, half barrels, and then quarter barrels. For my cases, we make 12-ounce bottles in 24-bottle cases. So I'll find that here. And then for my beer destroyed from cases entry, like I said, our bottles are 12-ounce bottles. So it's very rare that we destroy a whole case at the same time. It's usually 1 or 2 bottles that are broken from somebody throwing the cases around too hard in the cooler. All right, so after I've gotten all this set up the way I like, or I could mention that we can also, rename this if we want. So sales process, and there's some other features that I won't get into, but let's say we're done with this and then basically we just save it. All right, so we've created our process. So let's go back to the beginning page here. So let's say I just logged in. We sold some beer today, and I need to make entries for that. So what I'm going to do here is search for this process. Here it is, sales process for webinar. And then I call that up just by clicking on it. So now what we are in is use mode. You can get back to edit mode if you want, just by clicking the switch. Like you can see where we just came from this page. But now we're in use mode. We can actually make entries with this process. So what I would do is basically I would just go down the line, put an amount that was sold here. So let's say we sold 2 kegs. You would pick a batch. Say we sold our IPA, and then the target date. The target date is the day that the event happened in the brewery. So if this happened yesterday, let's say it happened yesterday on the 30th, I would just select that from the calendar. And then with every entry, you can make specific or optional comments for that entry. So you can record, ABV if you need to know that information for maybe your state forms. You can also, track specific kegs that were sold if you have a keg serial number, things like that. So let's make a few more entries here. Let's say that I also sold 1 keg of our Nitwit today. Again, you can make an optional comment if you want. And let's say that we gave a restaurant 15 cases of our ESB earlier this morning. Or we didn't give it to them, we sold it to them. And then, I walked into the cooler and lo and behold, I found, 2 broken bottles of a case leaking out on the floor. So I want to report that. So I can just enter, 2 12-ounce bottles. And it was actually our coconut porter. And then if I have a case serial number, I can do that here. I track that or whatever you want. All right, so here's all of our entries. 2 more tools on this page before I save these. If I want to apply a batch number to all of the entries at one time, I can do that here. Just select the batch number. And then same thing for a target date. If I wanted to apply a target date to all of my entries, let's say you might have like 20 of them in a specific process, you can do that really quick. You don't have to do it one by one, just by clicking apply. But we will ignore that for now. Oops. There we go. And so let's say we just want to save our entries now. So we click on the save button. There we go. And so we get a little receipt telling us all of the entries we made. So we can quickly compare this to our brew log, make sure everything was captured that we needed to enter. And let's say this was good. And that's the process of making an entry using a process. Let's say that you have some odd thing come up in the brewery. Say that somebody returned a keg that was previously sold to them for whatever reason that might be. And that's not really associated with a process because it happens maybe once every couple of months or very rarely. So instead of creating another process and going through the whole thing and saving a process and all that just for off the wall entry, you can make what we call a quick entry. So basically you would just select from the category here what you want to make an entry for. So let's say return and find beer returned to this brewery in kegs. And then we can make that entry real quick. So let's say just one keg. And it was our ESB and it was returned yesterday. And then we can make an optional comment with that. And then save it. And that's it. The entry was saved. So quick entries are just for those off the wall things that happen very occasionally. You can make a quick entry without having to create a whole process for that, and then remembering what entry was that process and blah blah blah. You can just do it really quick. So that was the process of creating entries. Next, let me show you how you would go through all of your inventory numbers to make sure things look correct. The best page to do that would be the batches page. We have what we call here our batch history. So that basically this takes all of our entries and collapses it underneath a batch number. And then so you can see here, we've made a total of 5 different batches in this test account. And then associated with all of these batches are all of our entries that we've made. Let me pull up a good one here. Yeah, so for example, this IPA here, we have 1, 2, 3, 6 other entries that make up this batch that we've made. So here's beer fermented. Here's beer transferred from our fermenter to our bright tank. Here is beer that was racked to kegs. And then here was our losses from the fermenter due to trub. And then you can see here we've made 2 sales entries, 2.5 barrels was removed for sale, to a restaurant or a bar or whatever. And then 2 of our 6 stills were actually sold to our tavern. So when you come to this page, you can see that we highlight all the negative amounts right off the bat. So you obviously don't want a negative inventory. That's not really based in reality. It's not something that you can actually have happen in the brewery. So as you make the beer, it goes through your process and then is eventually sold. All of these batch amounts should end up being 0. So what we call is, you would visit this page in order to 0 your batches. So for example, if I accidentally made an entry, I had 0.35 barrels of loss instead of, the 0.25 I had, I would actually have a negative 10 from my cellar. So obviously I can't have a negative amount in my fermenter. So I would take a look at all of these entries here and see, okay, which one should I adjust in order for this amount to 0 out. So I can see here, okay, so I just made a little too much of a loss entry. I should, change that back to 0.25, and then that'll 0 out my fermenter for that batch. And it's really easy to change. You just change the number, and then you would click save, and then that new entry is saved for that entry, or that new amount is saved with that entry. You can also delete entries from this page if you need to. Say you made a entry for this IPA, but it was actually for the coconut porter. You can delete it and then remake it later. If you just want to see a specific batch, you can use the batch filter. I can quickly find, my IPA batch here if I don't want to look at all of them at the same time. Other feature on this page that's not doesn't have anything to do with the batch history per se, but is what we call batch blending. So, for example, you have 10-barrel fermenters, but you have a 20-barrel bright tank that you transfer two fermenters into the bright tank for carbonation. What you would do here is you would blend those two batches together. So for that example, I'm going to be blending in my wrecking bulk bright tank, and then I pick my sources, the amounts that I'm going to blend together, create a new batch number, and then the target date that it happened. And then I could save this, and it would take these two, these are two the same here. It would take these two different source batches, blend them together into this new target batch, and that's how you would do that in the software. Another spot that you can take a look at your entries to make sure they're making sense is what we call our entry log. And this is just a flat list of all of your entries that were made. You can see here that you have a column for user. So if you have multiple users connected to your account, you can see who made the entry, the type of entry that was made. The creation date is the date you actually accessed the software in order to make the entry. The target date is that date that you selected, that you said that the event actually happened in your brewery. And then again, here's the batch number that's associated, that's editable if you need to make an edit to that. And then the amount, which again is also editable if you need to make an edit for that. If you click on the information button, it would actually expand all the details for that entry. So for example, I made a entry for beer destroyed from cases just a few minutes ago. I can see that my original input was two bottles, 12-ounce bottles. And then all of my optional comments are also included here. So yeah, that's really helpful. You can also delete an entry if you made a mistake. At the bottom of the page is our filter. So let's say I just want to, there's 20 entries on this one page. I just want to see what happened for the 30th and 31st of this month. So I could, filter down dates and only see the entries that I made today. I could also filter by category. So if I only want to see, what was sold in a tavern from kegs, I can make a filter there. And as well, I could do a specific batch number. So you can see here, I filtered down, 20 entries on that one page down to just one by using the filter. We have an option here to export your entries. This will spit it out in a CSV format, and then you can import it into any spreadsheet program. If you have a filter that's being applied to the window, like I'm showing right now, if I export this, it'll only export the filtered entries. If I don't have any filters, it'll actually export all of the entries. Yeah, so that's the entry log. This is super useful, compared to, trying to save everything in a spreadsheet by itself. It's really easy to filter and see, along with optional comments. Just a little more difficult if you're trying to do this with a a spreadsheet program that you tried to program yourself. Okay, so we've made our entries. We've checked to see if everything's looking correct, and let's say it is. Let's go make a report, which would be our last step in the whole process. So first thing I'll show you is our daily records. So daily records are required by the TTB to be kept on hand in the brewery. You never have to send them in per se, but let's say the TTB's looked at one of your reports, they have a few questions, or maybe they've decided to give you an audit. You need to have these records on hand because these are what comprise and come together in order to create your operations reports. So your daily records have to agree with what you put on your operations report, and then your operations report has to agree with what is reported on your excise tax return. So let me quickly make a daily record. You basically select the few days that you want to make the record for and hit go. And we use the same format as a report of operations, so it's easy to understand. But you can see here, it has all your brewery information, and then for the day of January 31st today. You can see here that our starting balance at the beginning of the day was 34.2 barrels. That should be what our inventory was on hand. And then the entries we made for today, we have 1.26 barrels that was removed for consumption or sale or sold in our tavern. And then here's the 0.01 barrels that, those 3 bottles that we found that were broken in the cooler. And you scroll down a little further, you can see that we have detailed breakouts of all the entries that you made for that specific day. So again, here's the beer that was destroyed in the cases from those 2 bottles. And then here are 2 sales entries. One was sold to a restaurant, and the other was for our tavern. And so as you go along and make entries every day, you can print out these records, save them as PDF somewhere in the brewery, or you make a hard copy, and then you have all the entries that were made for that specific day. And then these records are what actually make your report of operations. So when you click on this tab, all of your past reports are collapsed here, and then the current one is just shown here on the page. And again, just to make the report real easy, you just print it out, and it spits out the report for you. And yeah, so you take a look at this, make sure it makes sense to you, and then either make a hard copy and mail it off, or again, if you have a pay.gov account, you can log into that, and then basically you would just transpose these numbers onto the electronic form in pay.gov and then submit it that way. And then lastly, to make an excise tax return is very similar to the report of operations. All of your past excise tax returns are collapsed under there, and then print out the one you need. Let's say it's April already. There you go. So from those few kegs that I sold, I owe $4.97. And then again, you would either print this out and mail them a check along with this form, or you would use your pay.gov account to submit that electronically. One more quick thing I want to show you before we take off here is our state report helper. So we're not able to, create every report for all 50 states. They all have different requirements, different forms. We're just a 3-man team right now, so we really can't create all those PDFs like we have for the federal reports. But we can, create this page that basically gives you 90% of everything you need for your state reports. And then you just take these numbers and put them on your state reports real easy. So for example, let me choose a month. Let's just choose January. And then this is just telling me that, the current month isn't quite over yet. So I should be careful with these numbers. But anyways, you can see at the At the end of this month, these are my inventory balances, and then cumulative amounts during the month, my additions, all of my removals and sales, any of my losses, and then beer destroyed. So I can quickly use these numbers to fill out my state reports, and then yeah, so um, there's a few things that this doesn't give you that are required. So for example, your state may require you to, break down the types of beer that was sold over using an ABV value. So for example, if it's below 4%, you might be taxed at this rate. If it's above 4%, you might be taxed at a different rate, and different things like that. That's where you would use the CSV export from the entry log. Hopefully you've been tracking all that in your optional comments, and then you can export those entries, and then you can quickly do, a quick sort on your own to find out exactly, what the state form is asking you. But for about 90% of all state forms, this will cover the bases. Yeah, so that's TTB Tamer in a nutshell. So, you would log into the software, create entries as to what happened. You would create specific processes, either for, the events that happen in your brewery, like brew day, kegging day, etc. Or you could create a process specific for people, sales managers versus brewers. You can make quick entries for those one-off weird events that happen in the brewery. And then, number two, you would take a look at the inventory that's being calculated. Use the entry log to filter specific entries if you want to look at something specific, and use the batch history to zero out your batches. Again, as beer is created, goes through your brewery and sold, all of your batch inventories should end up being zero. Oops. And then when you need a report, you print the report. Just click the print button. You can do that for daily records and your operations reports and excise tax returns. So yeah, really simple. So we've gotten to the end of the webinar. Here is the link for the brew logs. Essentially just our homepage / brew logs. There are two different types on there. There's one brew log that is organized by batch number. So you would create just one sheet for a specific batch, and then all the entries for that batch would be listed under it. And then the other log is just organized by date. So you just go to what happened early this morning, and then what happened after that, and then what happened after that. You would record what batch it was, and then what happened, and any the amount, and then any notes you had, stuff like that. So again, if you don't have a current brew log for your brewery, feel free to use it. If you have one already, I encourage you to download them and see what we're doing versus what you're doing. And if you have any, suggestions for us, I'd be happy to hear that too. Also, if you have any questions, feel free to email us, info@ttbtamer.com. I actually get all of these emails. They come directly to me, and then I would respond back to you. Typical response time throughout the day is within 5 minutes. And on the weekends, usually you'd be surprised. Sometimes I don't have much of a life, I think, but yeah, within 20 minutes on the weekends is probably pretty typical. I answer my email a lot quicker than phone, simply because I have to screen a lot of phone calls. I get, at least 15 spam phone calls a day. But if you want to shoot me an email, a phone call, you can do that. But I just have to end up giving you a call back anyways. So email is probably best for any questions that you might have. And then again, if you think this is very helpful, feel free to sign up for a 30-day free trial. Just off our homepage there. There's two options. There's $33 a month and then $290 a month. Pick which one, or not $200, $290 a year, which is a little less expensive, but it's for a year sign up. And yeah, pick up whatever one that makes sense for you. If you want to change in between either of them, I can do that. And then if you get really busy during the 30 days, just shoot me an email, say, hey, I'd like to check it out a little longer. I was really busy this month. I'm happy to extend trials. Yeah, so it doesn't look like there's any real questions for now. Again, feel free to shoot me an email, info@ttbtamer.com, and I'll respond to your questions there. Otherwise, thanks again for coming to our webinar, and I hope this was helpful for you. Thanks.